So I'll just say that I have 3 kids. I've been in Atascadero for 17 years. I know that because my oldest is 17. He's a junior in high school. His name is Colton. I have a middle son named Grady who's 15, and then I have a daughter who's 13 that goes to the Fine Arts Academy named Mazzy. So I have 3 teenage kids. And I say that all under the idea that I am not an expert in parenting. Most days I wake up and I wonder what I'm doing and how God gave me these gifts of 3 children and how not to screw it up. But for some reason, through God's grace, I think literally, I'm here and I got this shirt for Father's Day. If you can't read it, it says "Pretty Good Dad." I just told Daryl and those guys back there it was better not getting a shirt or a shirt that says "You suck." So I guess I'll take it. But again, none of the guys that are going to share the stage this evening are experts, and I want to just make that perfectly clear. We're all just humbly here admitting that as parents, as dads, we need help. We need community. We need to do it together, and I think we need guys to help encourage us, to help challenge us. And I hope that this event this evening will help spur us on to do that better with one another here at this church. I'm operating under a few assumptions here. One, that you guys want to be good dads. That's probably a safe assumption. Anybody here not want to be a good dad? Okay, good. You're in the right place. Maybe you're a dad that just needs a little bit of help. Maybe you're a dad that needs a little bit of resources. Maybe you're a dad that's doing it on your own. You don't have a wife that's active. Maybe you have a wife that's really active and really good at what she does as a mom, and so you sit on the couch a little bit more than you should, which I've been guilty of in my first few years of parenting. But wherever you are, wherever you're starting from, whatever place you're in, I hope you're in the right place. I feel like you're in the right place. The church should be a safe place to have those conversations. It's not a place where perfect guys come and act like perfect guys. I think it's a place where broken guys come and get healing, and broken dads come and get healing. And so I hope that's the plan for this evening, and that's why you guys are here. The purpose, and I put this up on a slide for us, the purpose of all the events that we do as intentional parenting and fathering here at the church are under this purpose statement. It's to create a community full of men that are helping raise kids of character together. And I think the key and operative word in that sentence is together. You can't do it alone. You can't do it in a silo. If anybody's tried to parent on their own or try to do everything of their own strength, you know you fail miserably. And together, I think we see ourselves challenging, encouraging, spurring one another on. And so I hope that this event, again, becomes a place where you say, okay, yeah, I want to do this together. I want to do it alone. I can't do this stuff alone. Unfortunately, society often paints dads in a very different light. And I think this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but bear with me. This is a fun video. Take a look. You don't have a video. Wow, that's unfortunate. Yeah, I could act it out. It's this clip from Jim Gaffigan. He's sitting on the Tonight Show couch, and he's talking about parenting. And the parenting is literally like, he says the words that often the dad is painted as the backup quarterback, right? And so the backup quarterback is like the guy that sits on the bench. You never want to see him in the game, and when he gets in the game, you're a little bit nervous about how he's going to do. Right? That's how dads are painted in society. So don't show the video, because, I mean, at this point, well, sure, go ahead. Sure. It's better.
Dads are kind of like the backup quarterback in the NFL. You know, you're on the team, but you're not the star. You know what I mean? And on the rare occasion you're brought into the game, people are nervous.
Does anybody feel like that? Like against our wives sometimes? That's how I felt. Like, man, my wife's got this covered. She's got everything dialed in. And I'm like the backup. And people would be nervous if I start parenting my kid. But that's unfortunately, I think, how society paints us. And, toward that end, if you look at the state of what parenting looks like, let's just look at like what fatherless homes look like. There's a lot of stats that kind of support this. I don't want this to be like I don't want to beat the drum of like how negative it looks, but this is what fatherless homes are. There's stats to prove what it looks like when a kid grows up in a home without a dad. Some school stats, 70% of high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. 85% of kids with behavioral problems come from homes without a dad. And then kids that don't have a dad in the home are 2 times more likely to be involved in early sexual activity. Probably a list we'd never want to see ourselves on, right? Or our kids having to come from. Drug stats, 75% of kid patients in chemical abuse centers come from fatherless homes. And then prison stats, which I think are incredibly telling, 68% in juvenile detention centers are from homes without a dad or have no contact with their dads, and 70% of long-term inmates grew up without a father. And so I think those stats paint this sobering picture of the difficulty of a kid being raised in a home without a dad. Fortunately, you guys aren't in that situation. You're here, you're involved in your kids' lives, I hope. And I think the stats that are on the next page, I think, point to what it looks like involved dads, when kids have an involved dad in their life. And that would be the next slide, Matt. Let me show that. Kids with involved dads, and you can kind of read through this, are way better at problem solvers and have higher IQs and get better grades on average, things we'd all want for our kids, right? They're more likely to be happier and more satisfied with their lives overall. They're more likely to have friends and better relationships. We're setting them up for success versus failure, right? So an involved dad is part of their kid's life. Success and the trajectory is upward and to the right and not down and to the left. And I think that's the point. And I don't point these out as a shame-based thing or anything like that. I just point them out because I think what we often do is we see those stats and then we say, okay, I'm doing a pretty decent job as a dad. I'm doing a pretty decent job. And I think most of us are. And I look out in this crowd and I've watched you guys interact with your kids. I've seen many of you interact with your kids. And to be honest, like, I don't know that I belong up here most days. We talked about this as we were praying as a group in the back. Many of us feel as though we're not equipped to stand in front of you and speak as though we're experts, and we aren't. And I will share that right out of the gate that none of us are. But we all humbly submit to you guys now, tonight, that we know we can't do it alone and we want to get better at it. So how do we do that? And I think that that's the question that I want to start with is, what type of dad do you want to be? What type of father do you actually want to be? You probably set out to be a dad and had these questions and thought, okay, what kind of dad do I want to be? At the end of the day, when I've raised my kids and I'm playing the long game and my kids look back, will they give me a t-shirt that says pretty good dad? Or will they not want to talk to me at all? Or not even want to be a part of my life? What kind of dad do we actually want to be? And then how can the church help? Like, what's our plan? Where does the church get involved in that? What do we do? What's our place in helping dads do this better? And I think just from a practical sense, our hope is that we can provide you guys some practical tools to do that better. I hope that intentional events like this, where it's an open question and answer session with some dads that have made some mistakes and had some successes, and then you can draw from those things. I think those would be really helpful, and I hope they are helpful to you specifically tonight. I hope the next wave of events that we do, which will be more of a roundtable session with question and answers, will be an effective tool for you. So those are ways that we hope to resource you guys. I hope that we can do more of the serving events that we've talked about in the past. We've tried to do serve days with our kids and get dads involved in serving alongside one another here at the church, whether that's out in the community or at the church, whatever it is. But creating environments where you guys can grow and help, encourage, and spur each other on is how the church gets involved. And I'm gonna right out of the gate, I'm gonna tell you that this next part, I'll acknowledge that it could be uncomfortable for all of us. But I want to slow down just for a minute, and I want to pose each one of you guys in this room with 3 questions. And I'm going to invite Jared to come up just for a second, and he's going to just noodle around on the keyboard to provide some background music for anybody that struggles with ADD like me, who can't just sit in quiet and answer a question. But what the 3 questions I want you to think about, there's 3x5 cards in front of you in the pews. There's a pen there too, and I want you to grab those. And the 3 questions I want you to answer, and I want you to use this as a reflective time. And please, this isn't like a turn in at the end of the night. I'm not going to look at anybody's card and judge you. None of it. That's not what this is about. The hope is that this card will serve as something you keep, you bookmark, you use it however you want, to look back a month from now and a year from now and say, okay, this is what I've done. Here are some steps I've done to address these questions or change some of these behaviors. So the 3 questions are, and I want you to just think about these. They'll be on the screen the whole time you guys are thinking about them. But what 3 words or 4 words would your spouse or significant other, if you have one, or your kids or your kids, describe you as a parent with? How would they describe you as a parent? 3 to 4 words. Second question, maybe a harder one, especially if the answers differ, is what would you want them to say about you? And then 3, and this is, again, where I think we'll get into some question and answer later in this evening, is be honest and write down a parenting win or a moment where you just absolutely blew it as a parent. And be honest with yourself, knowing that I'm not going to look at your card, no one else is going to look at your card. But write those 3 things down and just spend 5 to 7 minutes. An uncomfortable amount of time for a guy to sit and think. But spend 5 to 7 minutes and just reflect on this, and we'll jump back up in a minute. But we're going to get to some questions, so I'm going to invite several of these guys, and I will reiterate, not experts. They are parents. That's literally the only reason they're on the stage. But I'm going to ask each one of these guys, and none of them, they don't know what questions are coming, so sorry, guys. But let me start with Shane, if you don't mind. Shane, that top question, what are the 3 words your spouse and or kids would say about you, and what would you want them to say?
We on here, Matt? So, funny that you should ask, because they wrote it down on 3x5
Keep it right
cards.
close to your chin.
Wrote it on 3x5 cards here. And I carry a lot of stuff in my pockets, so I'll get to it shortly. Gum. Okay. So, Summer said, understanding, fun, and loving. And I went with her first because she's a jewel and she speaks very kindly. Brooklyn said loving, kind, understanding, and thoughtful. And Rayanne said patient, fun, and affirming. And honestly, that's what I really hope to hear. Because from my own, my experience with my own father, I really have tried to be intentional with my girls and to affirm them. They feel very confident to express themselves, at times too confident. I may be erring too far the other way. But I want them to feel affirmed, and I want them to feel unconditionally loved. And I do not feel like an understanding father. A lot of times I feel like I'm prone to frustration. I simmer, and then I boil all of a sudden. So that was good for me. It was affirming for me to hear that Summer feels that I'm understanding, because that's my prayer.
Sean, can I ask you those same 2 questions, please? And then, if you wouldn't mind, when you introduce yourself, tell me your name, spouse, and then how many kids you got.
Okay. All right. My name is Sean Brown, and I've been going here to ABC for quite a bit, probably close to 10 years now, with my wife, Chanda. And we've got 3 kids, 2 boys, and then a little girl. She's not so little, but I still call her my little girl. But just like Shane, I asked them as well. And I asked them separately, and I told them to kind of go back and think about this as well before you come and tell me, because I didn't want them to tell me something that I wanted to hear. So I told them, go think about it. And so my oldest came back with adventurous, humorous, and then he threw a big word at me, magnanimous. And I'm like, what? And that means generous and forgiving. So that was cool. My middle boy threw out leader, role model, and present. And then my daughter, and we have a fantastic relationship, very unique relationship, so I was kind of scared here. But she came back with, she can be a smart, But she came back with caring, protective, and smart. And I couldn't have asked for better words, and I thought they kind of nailed it. Because if I was to write a resume right now with those, as I would describe myself, I wrote down Christ-like, servant leader, and I think all of those are kind of implied in what my kids came back with. So.
That's awesome. All right, I'm going to switch. One, I told you these guys weren't experts, and they weren't, they were probably in the same boat as most, but those are pretty good answers to the first 2 questions. So let me just share mine, because mine sucked. My kid said angry, short. Wait. Not physically, like short with my comments, but also on the physical stature side. Wordy. So oftentimes I'll go in with an agenda and I'll use far too many words. And then they use the word intentional. And I think it's because they knew I was doing intentional parenting things. So those are my 4. Anyway.
You responded with grounded.
Wish I could at this point. All right, so switch gears. Josh, I'm going to ask you, the third question on that list is, be honest and tell me either a parenting win or just an absolute disaster or failure that you experienced with one of your kids or a couple of them. Sorry.
Just one.
Just one.
Just one. I don't know that I have necessarily like a specific huge blow-up failure to point to right this minute, but I have somewhat of a recurring one, which is just that I tend to get really frustrated and losing my cool, and is this on this recurring like bad attitude. Does anybody else deal with that with their kids at home, like the bad attitude? And so one of the words that I think they'd probably use if they could get to the word would be expectant, that I tend to have a lot of like expectations, and that's one of them. Like I just have an expectation that they're gonna have good attitudes and treat each other kindly and be respectful, and it's gonna be awesome.
And it's not always that?
Never happens like that, ever, and yet I'm still surprised every day when I bump up against the like, what's going on here? And I think recently I had a pretty big awareness, and it was probably both of those things at once. It was a big blow up and a big miss and a big win all at once, which was just realizing that I take on this debt to debtor relationship because I have this expectation that I'm owed something and then I'm not getting it. And so that's what I'm really upset about. And I take this position on that I'm owed it, and I am really upset, and I'm angry, and I emote, and I express myself in ways that like aren't helpful to the whole family. And then I go like, wow, I have like had tons of my debt canceled, a lot. And it's really hard for me, or has been really hard for me to cancel theirs, right? I just stand on this position like, why aren't you? But like here I am every day like bathing in the grace that I get and so thankful for the debts that I have that are canceled on this consistent basis. And then that's been the big shift, is like moment to moment being like, okay, I'm not owed anything by them, and I need to move from this expectant to more unconditional, and showing them that like I'm always there and I'm gonna help them regulate, and I'm gonna help them get back to this place of being able to handle whatever big emotion they have going on. I listened to a parenting podcast, and she said, you need to let your kids borrow your nervous system and co-regulate because theirs is not fully available to them. Theirs is not fully available to them, and mine is. So that's been huge for me. It's just the shift of knowing that I need to cancel the debts. I need to take this position of continually forgiving my kids, even in a moment to moment, like the small things, why'd you talk to your sister like that, and why'd you look at me that way, and why'd you stay on the device longer than I told you could, right? So.
And you're married with, tell me your family.
Oh yeah, Josh Donovan. I've been married to Brianna for 19 years in May. And we've been coming to ABC for a really long time. Some of you know I used to own and operate Give Fitness, and you were members there, and I didn't judge your attendance at the gym, so don't judge my attendance at church. Okay? There you go.
And then you have 3 daughters.
3 daughters, 13, 11, and 10.
Perfect. Thank you, Josh. Steve, would you mind tackling that same question? Would you share, when you hand the mic to him? This is Steve Moore, and tell me a little about your family, and then
So
tackle
I'm
that last
Steve.
question.
I have a 16-year-old son and 3 daughters, 14, 11, and 8. Wow. So just, they're funny now, but they weren't at all at the time. A number of years ago, we were at Hume, and I was trying to teach my kids to play Catan. If you don't know Catan, God have mercy on your soul. It's one of the greatest board games ever. And I was teaching them to play, and they were having a whole lot of fun. But of course, because I knew what I was doing, I realized I'm going to win. And so I just kept encouraging them, and then on my last turn, boom, 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 scored all these points, and I was like, welcome to Catan, losers. And my oldest was probably like 10 at the time, and they just all got up in tears and left. We were staying in my uncle's cabin. My wife just looked at me like, who are you? What are you doing? But yeah, I did that. And it took a while to sort that out. And then last year at Hume is just not a win for me. Last year at Hume, my daughter, who was going for the first time, she's 14 now, she's actually giving her testimony. She gave this testimony a month or two ago. So anyway, we were there this summer. I was there with the boys, and she said, Dad, don't embarrass me. Whatever you do, don't embarrass me. So obviously the first thing that I did was I embarrassed her. I didn't mean to. I walked up to where they were, and I was like, Hope, anybody want me to? And I didn't actually do anything, but just the threat of embarrassing her really embarrassed her. And I didn't get it. So this was whenever June, July. And this didn't get resolved until November. I didn't understand, oh, I'm so sorry. But she was profoundly hurt. And when I began to recognize that something had shifted, I started to try and hang out with her. Hey, we should try and talk with her mom. Like, we should go talk. And she kept going like, Mom, do I have to? And so she was like avoiding me. She wouldn't go for a walk. She wouldn't do anything. And come to find out, she was doing it on purpose. She knew that I wanted to make it right and that I wanted to apologize to her, but she was so hurt that she couldn't and she wasn't ready. And finally, thank God we sorted it out. But I have a lot of failures. I will say this, this is ridiculous, but my wife and I recognize that our relationship is part of our parenting, and I can't be a great father to my children if I'm a crappy husband to my wife. So some of you guys may too, every 2 weeks we go to see Alice Witt, we want to be coachable. Wherever our marriage is, it's good, it's bad, it's medium, we want to go. So we get marital counseling, coaching every 2 weeks, every Wednesday. Well, this last Wednesday, I got mad and I left without her to go to marital counseling, which is the most ridiculous thing. Literally drove away to go to marital counseling without my wife. And what's worse, I don't know if you know where Alice lives, but she lives in Spanish Oaks. So I'm angry for about 15 minutes, and then I'm like, and now I'm sitting here without the code to the gate feeling like an idiot because I can't even get in to get marital counseled. So we have a lot of failures, just constant. One of my beautiful children, she's feisty and strong-willed, and it turns probably daily into raised voices with her mom and I, or me and her, and it's hard. She's brilliant, she's sweet, but it's a difficult moment, and we don't know what to do. Today I was like trying to teach her breathing exercises, or let's reflect. Let's do the 3 that we learned at culture conference. So there's a lot of failures. The most important thing, the wins, is I'm pretty good at apologizing when I recognize it, even if they won't let me. I try. I've written a lot of I've actually written songs that they ask me to sing, at night. I've written skits for all their school talent shows. They all will sit next to me. Even my 16-year-old boy will kind of lean against me when we're watching movies and stuff. And so that really feels good. Of course, my 8-year-old daughter's going to climb on my lap. But when some of the other ones are still willing in their own turmoils and with my own failures, I think that's a win. The hardest and most rewarding thing. I'm not going to go through them, but I got a whole list, not necessarily complimentary, that I had them answer those questions yesterday. But yeah, a lot of wins, a lot of losses. Just trying to be real with my kids. So
that's good. Thank you for your honesty, Steve, and stick with that marriage counseling. Greg, I'm going to put you on the spot, and this is a softball, Greg. What sucks about parenting right now, and how have you fixed it? And then anything you haven't been able to fix, softball.
What sucks about parenting?
Yeah.
What have I not been able to fix?
Because not everything's rosy, right? I mean,
No.
it can't be. And explain your family a little bit, and then, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't prepare notes for this one. Greg Squires, my wife's Carrie. We have 4 kids, 13, 11, and twin 9-year-olds, 3 girls and a boy. I'm going to share the 3 words first, and it's a T-shirt my kids gave me, World's Greatest Father, with father struck out, and it's farter. So I wear that shirt proud. I should have worn it tonight. So yeah, take that one home.
That's a tough one.
So yeah, there's plenty that's broken. One of the struggles that I've been recently working on, or like I guess trying to understand, is like I have 4 different kids, and I know that I'm like one dad, and I want to be the dad that they need me to be, but they're all unique. And I don't think consistency is the play. I think I have to adapt. And so one of my children in particular is quite strong. And so I've sensed I need to meet that strength in them, but I think I don't know how to do that without being harsh. So, and I've been reflecting on that, like, why am I inconsistently harsh with this one? Sometimes I think it's what they need, but I don't think I've figured out how to, like, adapt to their different needs, personalities. And I think sometimes it's out of a unhealthy need or desire to, like, crush them. Like, you need to go back in your place. Like, you're acting out. And so I think I've just been trying to understand that. So I guess that's certainly unsolved. Can probably think of more. If I have a minute.
No, that was a good example.
Yeah,
That was
but
a
yeah,
good
I think if any of you have multiple kids, you realize, like, okay, there's program A for kid A is not program A for kid B. So,
Yeah,
that's what I got.
that's good. Matt, I'm going to put you on the spot now, last one, and then Tim, I'll get you last, and then we'll open up for some questions. So, Matt, give me a little bit about who you are and your family, and then the question I want you to think about is, what are some intentional things you did as a parent that you can point back to now? What are the intentional things that you're now seeing fruit of that you did as a parent?
I'm Matt Williams. My wife and I, Joni, have been married 45 years, which says a lot more about her than it does me. And I have 3 kids, a son Luke and 2 daughters, Lacey and Laura. They're all grown and out of the house, and I actually have 6 grandkids. Something I definitely did very intentionally was date my kids from a very young age, probably around 5 or 6 when they really understood what we were doing. I would put on a calendar a day for each of them so that I took them out once a month. So I had 3 kids, so somewhere in each of those weeks I would take one of them out. One of the errors I made, is Luke here? Is my son here? Okay, good, I can tell stories. One of the mistakes that I made in doing that was I always associated those times with food. And with my son, it caused an eating disorder because he associated food and love together. So when he moved out of the house and started having hard times, anytime he didn't feel loved or appreciated or accepted, he started eating. And that was something that we had to work out, and I had to apologize for because I did not know that I was doing that. So I was learning that along the way, but like with my daughters, and what I would recommend to you as you go out and date, no agenda, just listen a lot. Because when you're at complete ease with them and you don't have an agenda and you're not trying to push what you want them to think or, tell me about your friends, where are you hanging out with, what are you doing? It's just more along the lines of just being out there and saying, so what's going on in your life? And ask, open-ended questions like, what was the best part of your day today and why? And then just shut up. That bonded me with my children more than anything else because we did that all the way up through their teenage years. And thank you, Jesus, that each of my kids are some of my best friends and they still like to, thank you, Jesus, again, they still like to hang out with me. So that was one of those things I intentionally did. One of the other things that I had to become intentional about was controlling my anger. I think we've all discussed that I'm a controller. And when they were 5, 6, 4, you tell them what to do, where to go, what to eat, what to wear, when to get up, when to go to bed, and you get into that mode, and they start pushing 10 and 11, and you keep trying that, and you will fail, and you will lose control. You will lose control. And I would get angry at my kids, and much like Josh said, I had a sense of possession. I wanted them, look, you're mine, you're my kids, this is what you do, this is what we do in this family, so do it. It got to the point that at that time, Christian counseling was helping me understand that I really needed to own up to what I was doing wrong and apologize to my kids. Not groveling, but that open, honest dialogue that says, you know what, last night when I said that, I was wrong, and I'm sorry. I hope that you can find it in your heart to forgive me. But what that did was it pushed me to de-trigger those events by asking them to help me. So I gave each of my kids permission. Anytime you begin to feel uncomfortable with me, you have my permission to get up and leave the room. And there I would be going, now you don't understand. When I say I want you home at 10 o'clock, it's like, and my daughter gets up and she starts, I go, hey, where are you going? She says, well, you said I could leave the room. It's like, oh, okay. Okay, no, you're right. Come sit down. Okay. You know, and have to build that into our relationship. I'm sorry to say it, but, you know, my kids had to, in a sense, become my helper in that. And that, again, helped us understand each other, that they were saying, okay, you have a problem and you've admitted it, and if you can't come to grips with it, then I'm going to help you by leaving the room. It's like, okay. And that didn't happen very many times, because eventually I would hear myself getting heated and pull it back. The other times I would also have to just basically say, you know what, we can't do this conversation right now. Let's come back in an hour and I will cool down and we can talk about it. My son prodded me one time. Man, that kid pushed my buttons. I had asked him to take care of his truck in a certain way because it was a very simple water leak. It's like, just be sure you check the water in your truck anytime that you drive it until we have a chance to fix it. Well, he calls me on the phone and says, hey, Dad, went dry, seized the motor. You know, okay, we'll talk about this later. And so he gets home and he says, okay, Dad, let's talk about this. I said, no, there's no way. There's no way we can have a conversation over this right now. No possible way. And he pushed me, and finally I had to get in my car and leave, only to come back and later and have that conversation. But it was one of those things where it's like, when you know you can't have that conversation, don't have that conversation.
That's good advice. That's really good advice. I needed to speak that into myself a couple months ago. That's really good. All right, and Tim, the last one, and before I open it up, and I hope you guys have some questions on your mind to ask these guys. Tim, what are some intentional things that you're doing right now? How are your kids responding? What are some intentional ways you're parenting? You have the youngest kids in this group, I think, looking across the stage. What are some intentional things you're doing right now with your young kids?
Beat them. No. My name's Tim. My wife's name is Marissa. We've been coming to this church for about a year. I have an older daughter, Lily, who is 6, and Leo, who is 3. Intentional things that I do with my kids. Give them Jesus. Just in almost every correcting moment, apply it to the Bible somehow. Because I am a terrible father. Early on, there's lots of advice. There's lots of good advice. There's lots of people that go before. So I try to take it all and listen and apply it and treasure it and do stuff. But like, despite all the advice, like, I'm still royally screwing up. And my journey started early on with like, I don't want my kids, well, specifically my daughter, to marry somebody who won't apologize. I want her to marry a strong man. I want her to marry a good man, but I also want that man to admit that he can be wrong. And model, like praying that prayer and then going like, okay, now I got to model it. Like, that sucks. And my daughter's very smart, so it sucks. She remembers a lot. She has a near photographic memory, I think. But she remembers all the times I hurt her feelings. And so having to sometimes eat my parenting or eat my discipline, admit I was wrong or admit I was too harsh, go into her room when she's crying, admit I was wrong. Those are purposeful, but those are also like shots to my pride. In learning moments, a lot of times trying to bring up scripture, I have my kids try to memorize scripture. Leo doesn't cooperate. He makes a joke out of it, but Lily remembers a lot of them. When they go through hard things, point them to Jesus. If you have a hard time controlling your emotions, talking about it, but also like, what can we do when you're scared? And I don't know, Leo will make a fart noise. I was like, no, like we pray. Like we can ask God to give us strength or courage. Like if you're having bad dreams, like you can pray. Like you don't need to run to me. I'm here. You can run to me. But like Jesus is bigger. Every night I try to also remind him that God loves him no matter what. Loves him more than daddy. God will never hurt them. I will hurt them. I will let you down, but God never will. So like never run away from God. You can. He'll forgive you, but you shouldn't. So I don't know. Like I feel like the most intentional thing I do is just point him to Jesus because he's the only person that's not going to screw him up. And he's going to be in every situation I can't, you know, like I'm not going to be at school. Like I'm not going to be helping them choose kids. I'm not going to be helping them with their homework. I'm not going to be helping them choose a spouse. Like I'm not going to be there for so much, but I do know who will be. And I think like my biggest thing is like those kids are his kids and just basically try to point them. You really need a timer back there. I don't know how long I've been rambling.
Too long. No, you're fine. You're great.
Done.
You're really good. There's no timer. Does anyone have a question? I know that takes a lot of courage to ask some questions, but you've heard from each one of them the questions I've got. I want to hear from you guys if there's things that you want to know about each one of these guys. And I know it's probably just a snippet of each one of these guys, but some of you know them, some of you don't. But are there any questions? Yeah, Jesse, let me bring you a microphone. Gotcha.
If you can think of something, what's something you worried about a lot when your kids were little that looking back on, you're like, I shouldn't have worried about that so much?
Anybody want to tackle that? Raise your hand if you want to tackle it.
My wife and I worried a lot about sleep, and we got through it. I mean, life moved on, and they figured it out.
That's good. Anybody else got an answer to that one?
How old are your kids?
5 and 2.
I think we worried a lot about who their friends were going to be, were they going to make wise choices? And I think what we found out was we model friendships, and we've been shocked and really pleasantly surprised how in different stages of life the girls seem to start drifting towards friends that we wouldn't necessarily pick, but they've always tended to self-center without a lot of input from us. And I think that's just a result of doing your best to model what you want for your kids, model the friendships that you want them to have. And for the most part, that seemed to work well so far. The jury is still out because mine are 13 and 10. So there's an asterisk next to that.
I'm going to reverse your question just a bit. I think one of the things you should worry about in a good way is the kind of parent you are intentionally working to become. Literally, your relationship with Jesus Christ, how much are you investing in that on a daily basis? Because you can teach your kids everything you know, but you will reproduce who you are. And that was something I worried about. What kind of man am I? Because parenting is about parents. It's not about kids. I mean, kids are in the mix, but the health of the parent gets poured into the children.
I would add, one thing for me is the pressure that I put on my children causes them to act a certain way and be so scared of the response, the shame that they feel, that they're not willing to share that with us or someone else, that they just hide the shame, and then the shame continues to snowball. And so for me, I want it to be an open environment in our house, which is hard, right? Like I've got 2 boys that are 16 and 14, so we're talking about masturbation, right? Like those are hard topics. That's not an easy thing to talk about. And yet, I know what it can do, what kind of damage it can do, and I want it to be an open conversation so that they feel safe. And if I'm not the safe place, then I'm doing something wrong. And I haven't been always the safe place. So I want to create environments where they're safe asking me questions.
And that starts real early.
Yeah.
I mean, you start talking about sexuality at 2 and 3, age appropriately, but it starts, the sooner you make it a comfortable topic in your home, it becomes a comfortable topic.
Yeah, that's good. Anyone else got a question? Jeff? Yeah. No, we got it because you're videoing it, so we have to know it's Jeff Erkey.
Please stop the video. Does anybody? A couple of you guys talked about just intentional time with your kids, and Matt, you're talking about date time with your kids. Anybody have suggestions on like questions that unlock conversation? Like, have you found a question or a couple questions that have been really helpful in some of those times? It's like this really evokes some thoughtful conversation.
John? Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things we've done, and my wife and I, and we've always asked our kids, we've done like a heat check. Like that first question up there. It's like, tell me how I'm doing. Or like, what do you think of me as, father? Like, we would just randomly do that, and that opens up some conversations. Like, Dad, you were kind of angry with Mom or something like that, or whatever it is, those kind of open up some conversations that we can turn, into good points. Yeah, we were, not happy with each other, but we love each other, and we're gonna get through it, or whatever it is. I mean, it could be just like, Dad, you're always angry at me, or I have the same thing. My medal's a little bit different. Why are you always picking on me and not your brother? Things like that. So I just ask them all the time, like, how am I doing as a parent? How am I doing as your father?
I like that. I like the sports analogy, like heat check. Yeah. Heat check. It's good.
Ooh, I'm going to beat Josh to the punch. Yeah.
Oh, go for it.
I got longer arms. With little kids, one of the things I do to almost guide them, like you can't have a super deep intellectual conversation with a 6 and 3-year-old. I mean, if you try, it's pretty interesting. Talk about Tyrannosaurus Rex eating a shark and which one would win in the water. But one of the things I feel like with the 3-year-old, with Leo being a boy and angry and whatnot, there's a very purposeful action to say it's okay to feel what you feel, but your outlet needs to be under control, because he'll stomp around or like a boy will punch his sister, this or that, and it's like, you're mad. Like, it's okay to be mad. And then as we introduce feelings, are you mad? Are you frustrated? Are you confused? Are you this? So as he's learning the verbiage and identifying feelings, he's better able for us to go, what are you feeling? And why do you feel that way? We definitely correct certain behaviors. Like, feel what you feel. You want to cry? You want to come? That's fine. But you're not going to, like, cry and be violent or something. Lily being a little bit more intellectual and older, she can hold the conversation, but the same types of things. You can feel what you feel and guiding feelings and behavior. I've noticed with Lily, though, it's especially when she's heightened, she won't talk, but yet she craves connection. And so I think in order to get her to talk, I usually end up sitting on her bed for a while. Are you ready to talk about your feelings? She'll cover up with the blanket. Okay, I'm gonna sit here and like rub her back or something. So I feel like with Leo, that's lots of guiding and don't stomp your feet and beat me. And with Lily, it's much more like just wait.
It's good, yeah. For me, the intentional time is gold. I do the same thing with my girls, but I put the wife in the rotation. So 4, right? I try to do a date night once a week, and that way all 4 of my girls get a date once a month, and it's a great system. And that's something that I'm really big on is systems and habits. I do a little bit of this like coaching and leadership development professionally, and the line is, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So if you're thinking about like, oh, I want to spend intentional time with my kids, like I would highly recommend create a system around it so that it's consistent and they can count on it and they learn to be excited about it. One of the things that really works, to your question, Jeff, for me is to get my kids moving. So we'll go walk around the lake park, We'll go play catch in Sunken Gardens, try to get outside. So if we're getting outside and we get them moving and they're doing something else, and sometimes that talking comes a little bit more naturally and they're not even super aware of it. And similar to a heat check, is anybody familiar with Brené Brown? Okay, I want you to get familiar with Brené Brown. She's a shame and vulnerability expert. So she is really good in the space about creating the space for conversation. And I would highly recommend everyone watch The Call to Courage. It's on Netflix. It's a great special. Watch it with your significant other. And the whole setup is like the man in the arena that's having these hard conversations, right? And she calls it the story in our head. And I use that a lot when I'm apologizing. Hey, the story in my head is that you think I'm a terrible dad, or I've made up this story and there's something going on in my head that's contributing to this. Same when I'm trying to create conversation. Hey, what's the story in your head about our parenting recently? Hey, what's the story in your head about math? I noticed that thing came out this year, but I want to know what you're thinking about it and how you're talking about it. And that language helps them kind of go into the head and go, oh, what story am I writing? What am I telling, right? And the stories that we write in our head influences and impacts our behavior. So whatever we believe to be true is how we show up and behave into that thing. And once I hear the story in their head, we can start talking about if there's opportunity to rewrite it, right? Like, well, what would it look like? What's another story we could write? My youngest came home and said, Emily doesn't want to be friends with me anymore. You're like 8. How do you know that? Well, she had lunch with someone else. Did she tell you she didn't want to be friends with you anymore? No, she just had lunch with Savannah. And I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe she doesn't want to be your friend anymore. What's another story that's possible? Maybe she just wanted to have lunch with Savannah. Oh, what else could be possible? What's another story, right? And if we're gonna write a story, which we do because we're humans and we're story writing creatures, let's write a generous one. So how can we write a generous one? What would it look like to have Jesus help us write that story? How would he want to write that story, right? So that's language-wise, as far as getting them talking and using it yourselves and modeling it. That's worked really well for us, and that's a Brené Brown thing called the courage.
That's awesome. One of the things I heard from these guys is each one of those, they take time. And that's an intentional thing. Like, we have to carve it out, right? So the example I see in the story I see in my own family is that my wife will walk into our kids' rooms and literally just sit at the feet of their bed and wait and talk and just be present. My tendency is to walk in with an agenda. Like, I've got 3 questions we're getting through, and we're doing it, Like, that's my tendency, and I've learned so much from the way that she operates and the way that she manages that time element. Like, she's willing to give the time, which shows that she cares. And I walk in with an agenda, and my kids are like, well, he's short, he's wordy, and he's angry, right? He wants exactly what they describe me as. And so it is the narrative I've created, right, for my kids. And so I love hearing the time, which is a sacrifice, right? And that is part of our parenting and a lesson we need to learn and grow in. Is there anybody else got a good question? Seth, yeah, what's up? You have to do it in the microphone.
Yeah, I appreciated those of you that talked about your wives and how important that was to parenting. So what are some things, those of you who have been married longer than I have and kids are older, what are some things you've done to support your wife or has been really intentional that you've done to help her in parenting that has really grown fruit to your kids and kind of in turn helped your kids grow into the kids you want them to be?
Good question. How am I doing and how can I help you? Like you were saying, just open talk. Like I think our wives really appreciate simple questions, and maybe they might not have answers right away, but I think making ourselves available to them, that's helped with me and Carrie for sure.
I would just add one question to that, like the how am I doing, how can I help you? How do you want me to listen? So a lot of us tend to be solvers and fixers. And so like, how do you want me to listen? Like, is this something you want me to solve, or is this something you just want me to download and support? That's been a game changer for us. How do you want me? But I want to go to 45 years over there and see what he has to say about that.
Speaking the truth. That is it. No, I mean, that's the nail on the head, that you listen, right, and you ask them. Because we're built to problem solve. They'll come in and say, well, I'm having this problem with, yeah, go ahead, I got it. I'm going to sit down here, I'm going to take notes, and I'm going to give you a plan, and we will execute this together. The greatest part, though, as you said, Josh, is where you go, am I solving or am I just listening? Mm-hmm. And they go, I just want you to listen. It's like, oh, vacation. Okay. Go ahead. I'm good. And then I can think of all of these other things that I wanted to think about while she's going on at the end. And then you make sure, with true empathy, you go, that must be hard. It is. Yeah. And inside I'm going, I would just punch them. But, that's problem solving. You don't do that. But that's a really, like you said, game changer there. I think the other thing, I just go back to Ephesians 5:25, that we are to be loving our wife as Christ loves the church and giving ourselves up for her. And those are the questions of, what can I do for you? What can I do for you in any time, any moment, anywhere? And your kids will see that. You know that their eyes are watching, and they see and they interpret so many things that words will never deliver.
Matt, I'll add one thing to yours that piggybacks on what Tim said earlier about apologizing, that I think the number one thing that we can do in our homes is apologize. But it's not just to our kids. I think apologizing to our wives and letting our kids see us apologize to our wives and letting them watch us take ownership, because that's the biggest, for me, that's the biggest reminder of loving my wife like Christ loves the church, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us, and he took the first step toward the cross. So every time I'm in my room pouting and waiting for one of them to come back and be like, I'm sorry, Daddy, or I'm sorry, I want them to come to me. And I'm trapped in my justification, sitting in my room going, I can't wait for them to come knock on this door. That's my job. I've got to go take that first step. That's dying to self, that's modeling Christ, that's humility, and as many times as I need to do it, I need to do it. And that's what I think is super important for them to see us doing.
And just to take another step inside of that thought, intentionally argue with your wife when the kids are present, when you know that resolution is possible. Your kids need to see conflict resolution. That was one of the things that I had the hardest time. It's like, no, we're going to talk about this behind closed doors. I mean, you're not going to talk about finances. You're not going to talk about scary things that they wouldn't understand. But let's say that you're talking about who's going to pick them up after school. She's got an appointment. You've got an appointment. It's okay. Argue that out in a controlled environment. But I mean, at the same time, those kids need to see problem, discussion, resolve, because they won't know how. And I grew up in a home where conflict resolution was never, ever demonstrated. Everybody got mad, went to different rooms, and then the next day, it just disappeared. So I never practiced it myself. So it's one of those things that you have to intentionally do, but it's okay for your kids to see you argue with resolution.
Yeah, and I would just piggyback on that, the opposite too. Show affection, show love, because that's a model as well. I've always kissed in front of our kids, hugged in front of our kids, and we get the, ew, mommy's kissing daddy, that kind of thing. But I would want to model what that love looks like for my kids, so that's why we do it. But the other thing I was going to add too is, this may just be obvious, but we've always been parents together. Like, we've never had separate conclusions or resolutions. We've always decided from a very young couple as parents that we are going to come together on whatever it is and not be separate on that. And that has shown respect to her and to me and kind of bonded us in that way. We don't negotiate with terrorists, and our kids were terrorists, and so we would literally, no joke, we would go away, like tell our kids, we'll get back to you because mom and dad need to go talk about this. It wasn't dad's going to do this or mom's going to punish you this way. It was give us a moment, right? Go to your room, sulk, just know we're coming back, that kind of thing. But that helped a lot. And to this day, my kids are 22, 19, and 13. We've never had that, mommy said this, daddy said that, or, a parent or a kid would come to this parent for something specific, or, trying to get around things. They know we're both on the same front.
That's great. All right, probably got time for like one more question. Anybody got one more? Who's that? Greg? Hi, Greg. Here you go, sir.
Maybe a little bit kind of on that last comment you were making. Has there been a scenario or a time for any of you guys where you've been in disagreement with your spouse about either a specific scenario and how to handle it with your kids, or maybe even a general parenting philosophy that you haven't quite gotten on the same page about? How have you gone about that?
My wife wouldn't let me spank my kids. I grew up getting spanked daily. So I didn't have a problem with it.
Shocker.
Like, repeat, breakfast, lunch, dinner. I don't know what my spoon count was as far as broken. My mom was a single parent, so I had just a wee bit of ADHD and hard-headedness. But anyway, so I grew up pro-spanking. Like, it was just, that's how I got spanked, so it was fine. My wife came from a very different household where she has some PTSD from it. So we fundamentally disagreed, and we are both very much similar with, like, we will also not compromise the other person's authority, in front of our kids. And so it wasn't like I spank, she doesn't, or this or that, or you're right, you're wrong. But we had some very, very tense conversations, some very tense incidences where I did choose to spank and told her, this is my rationale, sorry. There were times where I had to apologize to her. It's taken her also being aware that she has those things in her past where she actually needs to go to God and get some healing. Luckily, in the beginning of our marriage, it was just really Lily. She didn't need a lot of like physical spanking. It was just really much verbal. She understood consequences, or timeouts were bad enough. Leo's definitely more like me. But it's taken a lot. It took her a lot of moving towards me, and it took me moving a lot towards her. So my go-to cannot be spanking. Like, it's reserved situationally, severity. Like, you're running in the street, like, this needs to leave a mark. Like, you could die. So this punishment will kind of fit the crime or whatnot. There's a lot of different instances, but for the most part, I had to also compromise respecting my wife. Those are her kids. Those are God's kids. So I also was like, hey, God, like, this is the only tool in my tool belt. So, like, what else do I got to do? So I had to also relearn disciplining. I also had to relearn the difference between correction and love. Like, when do they just need a hug and an explanation? When do they just need to let it go? When do I need to let it go? When is it just pissing me off and not really an issue? So I think we had a lot of strife in the beginning, but better together through discussion and mostly Jesus.
Yeah, I was going to say compromise, Greg. And like, mine and Brianna's favorite song lyric is from Maroon 5, and he says, it's not always rainbows and butterflies, it's compromise that moves us along. And on that, when you're stuck, get help. And I think, like, that's probably one thing I would encourage all of us to think about, is like where and when we need help, and if we're willing to ask for it, and if we have support systems that we can reach out to. I mean, I think that's part of all of our intention in wanting to be up here, is like, how can we help in parenting things and coming alongside dads and doing this job together, because it's really hard. Right? If you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together. And as a dad, like, I want to go really far, whatever that means. But, Brianna and I have been stuck from time to time, not even necessarily on things we disagree on, things we agree on, but we feel helpless and don't know, like, and there was a time when our youngest was 2 and she was smacking Brianna in the face and biting her and like just really lashing out. It's like, what do we do? We came here, and at the time met with the family ministry pastor, sat down, got some good counsel and some guidance, and we've gone to counseling, we've gone to licensed marriage and family therapists, and I think like we just need to kind of remove any of that negative stigma around just like asking for help when we get super stuck. If you're trying to have these deep, intense conversations and it's not going anywhere, like bring in a third party, you know, that can be like a neutral sound of wisdom would be my advice there.
That's really good. So the way we're going to close this evening, I've invited Jerry Klein to...
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Steve, please. Yeah.
So this is actually kind of painful for me. I'm taking notes, and I literally, you know, and I carry a lot of just deep pain from memories of looks that my kids have given to me when I've hurt them, or pain that I've caused my wife. And I mean, I'm sitting up here going like, Lord, I just need. So I don't know like where everybody is. But what I do know is, Lord, what are you doing? It's hard to be a parent. And sometimes it's easy to come and to sit in an audience or to ask a question. But to really be able to be really just kind of raw and open and honest, I'm not going to have the conversation from the stage, but I was at... I love you, man. I was at Shane's house a week or so ago, just in pain about my relationship with my wife, in pain about a lot of my parenting fails. Everybody loves our kids. You know, we must be doing something right. But I know I've messed up a lot. But to have somebody in your life that you can actually sort this stuff out with, where it's not from the audience to the stage or from the stage to the audience, is super, super crucial. God doesn't want us struggling through this alone. He doesn't want us coming to seminars. He doesn't want us living some isolated way where I'm going to read the book and I'm going to get better. The books are great. But I think the most important thing is to find a way to live in community with people that you can just take off all the armor and the ugliest thing that you've done or thought in the secret place of your heart, when you can be real about that, and the pride is just diminished, demolished, then that's where you get help. And so, you know, we were prepped for questions about what happens if you catch your son or daughter looking at pornography. There's really deep, scary things that you're going to have to go through as a parent. And like the premarital sex questions and the what if they're hanging out with people who are doing this and that. And we didn't get into any of those things. But I think that there are some real questions that you guys either have now or will, crap. Why didn't I ask that as soon as you leave here, or tomorrow, or next week when your kid comes into your room and you're like, I'm completely unprepared for this, or I blew that. So if I had any words of encouragement, you just got to keep showing up in the lives of your children, and you have to have men with whom you can also just keep showing up. I do hub group for the high schoolers on Wednesday nights. And I've been with these guys for a year and a half. And my kid doesn't want me to be a subgroup leader. So I have a bunch of other 10th grade boys. But for the first time in a year and a half, one of these kids called me up and wanted to have a conversation with me about something like, this is going on in my life, when we sat in the parking lot and had the conversation. Like, I think just being there for your kids day after day and week after week, and being in relationship with people day after day and week after week, to have that stuff built in, so when the excrement hits the fan, then you have somebody to talk to, is super, super crucial. So I don't know if that was, but anyway, that's what I got.
That's a great final word, Steve. I think, you know, the thing that I leave with is, and I think I started with this, is we can't do it alone. Like, you can't parent alone. The only success I've had is God's grace and being poured into by other guys and being called on account by other guys and being held accountable to the things that I've done, good and bad, by other men that I trust in my life. And I think, again, that's the hope. The hope for even just this gathering is that you guys would connect with one guy in this room or maybe another guy in this room and find a way to do this together. It's impossible for me to sit up here and play matchmaker for every single person in this room. I wish I could. But each one of these guys has seen the successes and failures as a result of leaning into other men in their relationships and their parenting styles, and can speak to it and can point you in good directions. And if there's nothing that you walk away from, just don't walk away from this room and not connect with another guy in this room. Don't walk away tonight and just say that's the end of it. We're going to do more of these intentional parenting things. The next one we've got planned is April 10th, and it's more of a roundtable session where you're going to be paired up with guys that are kind of in the same parenting stage you're in, with kids that are of the same age, which I think is highly effective and great, and will make some natural connections. But a lot of it's going to fall on your shoulders to lean into relationship. And I know that's not always a natural thing for guys to do, but I promise it'll be worth it. And so I would just say don't walk away without making a connection.